prescribed title number 3, which asks, how can we reconcile the relentless drive to pursue knowledge with the finite resources we have available? I'm going to start by talking over a little bit about the question and my analysis of the question in general, and then I'm going to ask the panel to respond to a few thoughts. The first thing I noticed is it begins with the word how can we, well, the word how, and then it asks how can we. It's quite different in structure to a lot of the other prescribed titles this year, and how is asking us to kind of give a specific kind of an answer, really. It's not asking if we should reconcile it, do we need to reconcile it, but that's taken as assumed, I think, in this question. So the question is not should we, but how can we do this? So we should assume for the purpose of this question that we have things that need to be reconciled. Reconciling something is kind of like making friends. It's imagining a conflict and resolving that conflict. So we should assume for the purpose of this discussion that there is a conflict, and we're going to talk about the solutions to that conflict. How are we going to take this relentless drive on the one hand and finite resources on the other hand and kind of somehow make them friends, put them into harmony with each other, these two things, or find some way in which they can live together, these two things, or balance these two things. All of those different kinds of words could be ways of understanding that idea of reconcile. So I don't think I want, for the purposes of today's discussion, to question whether our resources are finite or not. Let's assume that part. Nor do I think we want to question whether the drive is relentless or not. We're just going to talk about how these two things can live together. How can we balance these two things? If you do want to raise some questions about those, we could do, but my proposal is that we just try to focus on the how can we. The third thing I was going to notice was that the word relentless sounds a little negative. That the drive to pursue knowledge in this case is almost sounding like something we would like to be able to stop, but we can't. Something that does not relent. Something that almost it feels like something out of control. That's a weird word to use. We don't necessarily need to focus on that, but I think it's interesting that the question seems to be encouraging us to think about the resources and see the finite, so the relentless drive as slightly problematic. So we might consider why that is. My first question then for the panel is about finite resources. What are the finite resources we have available, and what different ways can you think of to interpret that part of the question?
At first, when I just hear the word like finite resources, I just come with the natural resources, like the fossil fuels. So because this is like nature-born resources, so finally it will be it's a limited resources. And then also I just thought like money, because like money, we're not like billionaires, so to pursue some knowledge, to get into something like some knowledge, we have like limited or finite money, I guess.
Yeah, if money wasn't finite, it would be valueless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I piggyback on money?
Mm-hmm.
I dabble a little bit in physics. I don't know a lot. Anybody take physics here? Perfect. All right. So correct me when I'm wrong. So for example, like CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, this thing they built under Switzerland, this 17-kilometer long ring that they built underground, and they began building it in mid-1950s. And they asked for money for this project with the goal, with this knowledge of trying to find the basic building blocks of the universe. Like, what do you do with that information? So like so when I thought about this, when I heard this question, I'm thinking about like, we're trying to find the beginning of the universe, like how the universe came together, and we need money to build something that we don't even know if this thing exists. And this project was like, they only eventually found this Higgs boson. This is the thing, was the God particle, they call it. They only found this Higgs boson in the in the 90s, right?
More recent than that.
More recent than that? So, I mean, I think it's something like $17 billion has been spent on this project with the end goal, maybe finding something that isn't even important. So it's like that, when I was thinking about the pursuit of knowledge, and this is just the pursuit of knowledge, just for the sake of knowledge. You know, and they were able to find these resources. Now, it could have been quite possible for them, like, no, we're not gonna fund this anymore. But they were able to convince a large amount of people to fund it, to find this thing that was the unicorn. And a lot of people didn't even think it existed.
It's an interesting example of that because it seems first hand to be just a curiosity thing. We want to know what the universe is made of because we want to know. But there also will come from that presumably all sorts of applications. When we understand how the universe is built, we can apply that.
So when you heard that word relentless pursuit of knowledge, is it just like human nature? Like there's nothing we can do about it because we're born with this curiosity and there's nothing that can stop it? Like we want to find this God particle and we don't even know if it exists.
I think maybe. I would like to come and explore that drive a little bit more in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else we can do with the word resources. Jay, what do you... I never introduced everybody, by the way. I should do that. My name is Mr. Barton. This is Mr. Fleming, and Jay. Sorry about that. Jay.
So I got a Mr. Fleming statement, but I mostly agree with Tom because like money is really important like to pursue like there's knowledge. Like we don't have like if we don't have enough money like we cannot find like enough source and knowledge. But also I think like time is really necessary to pursue.
So time, yeah. Time is definitely a finite resource for us mortal beings with an end point. But if we say how can we could think of time as extending beyond my own life and human life. But even then it will be a finite resource. Even if we have 8 billion people working on a problem together, they will still have limited time to do things. They've got other things to do like Netflix to watch and we'll have limited time. So I was thinking of some other possibilities. So some mentioned fossil fuels, but there's all sorts of other resources that are limited in terms of materials and minerals and lithium and those kind of things. In terms of resources, apart from time, which is quite abstract, there's all of our mental resources. So we get bored. We have emotional resources. All of our emotional resources might be a little strained when things go badly. But also we have memory. Memory has a certain limit. If we try to learn everything, we might find, I don't know if this is provable, but it seems to me that the more things I try to learn, some of the old things get pushed out. And any kind of a...
Like that, I'm using that excuse.
Yeah. It's 'cause I keep trying to learn new things, and so that's why I forgot your birthday, you know, sorry. But yeah, so there's mental resources, imagination, if when we come maybe to the arts, but also in science we need imagination for these things, and so we have limited time and attention spans. So those are some thoughts.
Can I add to your imagination? Like when I was thinking, and again, this is in that physics field, because so much of it is theoretical. A lot of the discoveries they wish to achieve can't be done with the tools and instruments we have now because they're not invented yet. Like they're not small enough, or they're not accurate enough, or they don't have ways to even observe things we don't even know if they exist or not. So I think that ties into imagination. Like how creative can you be to create or even think about tools that can measure things that you don't even know if they exist, or how do you even create this tool?
That's a really good point. And I think your example of things not small enough yet, I was thinking of maybe our microscopes. We have these amazing electron microscopes. I don't know how much smaller we can get in terms of discovery. Same with telescopes. They're working on some new telescopes now. I heard that my brother in Durham University is working with a guy who's doing some exciting new telescopes that are going on. But even if we build new tech tools, they will still be finite resources, right? So a microscope is a finite resource with a limit on what it can discover, and the same goes for a telescope. And all of our technology are limited resources.
Senses,
Our
limited
senses.
by our senses.
Yeah.
Like we have 5. Well, there's actually more than that. But like we think about, we only have vision in this narrow wavelength of light, right? So that's limited as far as like what we can perceive and observe as we pursue knowledge.
Yeah. Let's move it forward. I think that's a really good point. We've got that kind of limitations of our brain, our senses, our body as human. Let's move it forward to this relentless drive. If we weren't to call it relentless, which sounds a little negative, what else could we call this drive? What is this feeling we have towards the pursuit of knowledge, and why do we feel it? Presumably, we can observe it in the way that we undertake the different areas of knowledge. Where do you see this drive appearing? Jay, what are your thoughts? What does it mean by relentless? Want to jump in? Sam?
Yeah, like, or like, when I heard like this word, like relentless drive, I can say another like unstoppable drive. It means that like we always like pursue and drive to understanding the world really more deeply. So it means that like in various of like AOKs, like we want to and gotta know about the world. So yeah, and like by understanding the world, like I think it depends on like individual or like organization. We have like different point of view, I guess. Like we can pursue the knowledge just based on like our satisfaction, or like just we want to develop the organization like we belong to. So yeah, I think because of that, like we can do the unstoppable drive of the knowledge.
So we pursue it for satisfaction, or to develop the organizations or institutions we're part of, maybe our nation or our school.
Or just like only for your to your interest.
Yeah, okay, our own interest or curiosity.
I think the Human Genome Project is an example of that. Yeah, I mean, you guys were born after that was completed, but this was something that a lot of people thought was impossible. Right, like we're gonna map every single letter of the human genome, and they did that. It took 20 years, and they found better ways to do it. Now it's like, oh, let's do all the organisms on the planet. You know, it's just like it's relentless. Like let's just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Every time we find a new species, we map its genome. So I think it just points to the fact that humans will never stop, right? As we pursue this knowledge, and it's some of it's for medical reasons, some of it's for evolutionary connections, some of it's just to do it. You know.
The Human Genome Project's a really good example, I think, in terms of perhaps starting to move towards talking about solutions to this reconcile thing. The question of how we reconcile this drive. So within the Human Genome Project, you have, on the one hand, an example of great collaboration. So the original project got together many different nations, and they tried to make it really equitable, so everybody was involved. After all, it's everybody's body's genome that we wanted to know about. That all these different universities and nations got together to collaborate on that. But then it was going quite slowly. They were following really careful scientific norms of we want to make a mistake with this because this is important knowledge. And this guy came along called Craig Venter, who was kind of a little bit of a megalomaniac, as I understand. He liked himself, and he decided that what he wanted to do was beat this team of universities and get his organization to discover it first. You know, this knowledge is going to be highly valuable. I'm going to get power, and I can use this knowledge. And of course, he didn't want to discover the genome of everybody. He wanted to put his own genome in there, so that his company started to find out the human genome, but they studied his genome. I thought that's really interesting. On the one hand, you've got this competition from a company, and it did speed things up. Like when he turned up, they cut corners a little bit. The methods in trying to work out how we're going to discover it was a little different, but because they were motivated a little bit by profit and fame and ego and all those kind of things, it actually pushed the Human Genome Project forward. So it's an interesting case study of collaboration on the one hand and competition as two drives within the ways that we work as humans towards knowledge. I really like that example.
And it's also viewed as a disappointment. Like we mapped the human genome with the goal of curing cancer and finding these mutations in these certain genes that can be fixed and modified, and we haven't gotten there yet. This is like this is 40 years later, and but we keep doing it, right?
We haven't got there with cancer, but they've got a number of FDA-approved genetic.
As far as going in and editing genes and like
I think there's a few approved by the FDA for not for curing cancer, but for curing certain diseases, as I understand it. I think that's 4 or 5 different gene editing techniques using CRISPR or talents. Let's talk about natural sciences, partly because we have a head of science here, Mr. Fleming, but also because the question specifically says that we should, as one of the 2 areas of knowledge, talk about that. My question to all of you is, would you consider natural science to be the most high cost, high reward area of knowledge? If you compare it to maths, human science, the arts, history, can we say that natural science is high cost, high reward? What are your thoughts on that? Anyone?
Yeah, I think it can be considered as the high cost, like the AOK, because like, first of all, like natural science, so I think it's one of the like base of the other AOK. So, and it is not just like created like automatically, because we have like the scientists or other people has to like find and explore this like AOKs to develop the new technology. So in like high cost means like it needs like lots of money and spend lots of time. So yeah, I think in those concepts, yeah, I think the natural science stuff high cost AOKs.
And also, I think even gonna take like higher cost, because for example, in earlier exploration method, humans travel like directly on spacecraft. But now they are sending robot, or such as the other thing, to reduce their risk from the safety problem. So definitely we're gonna take like higher cost to send robot to the space. And they want to take a mistake. That's why they need to use like more higher cost to prevent any like risk and safety problem.
That's really interesting. So one of the resources I hadn't considered was lives, right? So if you think about some of the scientific projects that have been undertaken, they have actually cost the most valuable resources, right? This is our lives. It's a really interesting point.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Space exploration is not cheap.
Right. Is it a high reward though?
How do you measure reward?
That's it.
So if you want to measure it financially, like there's projects underway where they're trying to collect resources from asteroids out there, right? And they get the resources necessary to continue the technologies here on Earth. So that's, some of these asteroids have astronomical values on them, right? But also going to Europa to see if there's life, and that's just to see if there's life. Like, what do we do with that knowledge later? We're going to fly out there, collect some of this. I don't know if you know what's going on there, but Europa is a moon that goes around Jupiter, and because of the tidal forces, they believe that there is an underwater ocean. And actually, when they look at it, they can see like these little geysers. So they think, since they believe that life originated deep in the oceans on this planet, that if we go there and collect some of this water coming from this moon, we can analyze it and see if there's any of these building blocks of life. And they're just doing that to find out if there's life. So I don't know if that has a high reward with a price tag on it.
I'm thinking of the Bill Bryson book, Short History of Nearly Everything, which I really liked. And he has this discussion with a scientist, which he writes about, and this scientist spends his whole life researching one really specific area. I think it was a kind of zoology, but it was a sub area, maybe it was a particular insect that he spent 45 years of his life researching. And I was thinking, what if, you know, a lot of his theory, they then move the cat, they do genetic research and they prove a lot of the work he'd done a little bit outdated. Maybe not wrong, that seems a little strong, but you know, they find a better way to categorize the animal, and all of that work, what was the value, right? So when we're thinking about high cost, high reward, we're gonna have to maybe accept that some of the science that we do might not be as fruitful as other things. You might, at the end of your career, go, well, I tried to find the Higgs boson, and for most of the scientists who worked on it, the answer was, I don't know if it's there or not. And Peter Higgs was the guy who it ended up becoming named after him, right? But well, there must have been all these other people that were looking, trying different experiments, and they didn't work. And scientific experiments are super expensive. If we're going to get there, we presumably need to accept a certain amount of failure or explorations down paths that don't lead us somewhere to be able to find the right one.
I don't know if you've ever been on a road trip with your parents, but do your parents ever say it's the journey, not the destination? So maybe the value is in the journey, right, and not what you find. And I think a lot of scientists would enjoy that journey as they learn and stumble along the way. And if they find something, they do. If they don't, it was still a nice trip.
So let's think philosophically about the reward. Like, what is the reward of knowledge? What is the value of knowledge? How do we decide what it is? One way to do so would be utilitarian, right? It's useful as we can apply it in this way. But the other way is it's just some knowledge we want to know because we want to know. It's intrinsically valuable to know a certain thing, maybe because we care about the answer, about how we got here, or that sort of thing. Those questions maybe are not going to be applied. They might just be things we want to know because we want to know. So any thoughts either on that kind of question of what's the reward element of knowledge, what's the value of knowledge? Anyone like to comment on that? Maybe it would be better if we take it into specific areas of knowledge. So what is the value of the pursuit of knowledge in the human sciences or in maths? What is the value of mathematical knowledge? What is the value or the reward of the arts? Why do we spend all this time producing paintings? What's the value of that?
Like math and art, the most important component is the creativity. Because like when you, for example, like art is one way to express the artist, the person's emotion or their thoughts by creating the artworks. So I think, yeah, by making some artworks, they can satisfy their personal satisfaction and the knowledge, I guess. And the math is math is when even we put a lot of money and lots of labors, we cannot make it's hard to make a new formula or theory. So while the mathematician solved the very hard math problems or create a new theory, this kind of this we can say that it is valuable by those kind of behaviors.
So you're saying there's a certain kind of natural way in which we do art, and did you apply that to math too, that it's just kind of valuable to know it anyway?
Yeah, because I think both AOK is based on creativity, so it makes people to satisfy, and it makes them to reach to their goal to pursue pursuing the knowledge, I guess.
And someone tell me humanities. What is the goal of humanities?
Good question.
What is the value? Where's the value in the knowledge there?
Isn't it kind of related to psychology? How can people organize in our society and make more good society?
So I was thinking a little bit about that with the sciences. So like peace, right? Like maybe we learn from our mistakes and we resolve conflict better. So as we gain knowledge in the sciences, like why can't one of the rewards be peace? Because as we have this changing world with growing populations and a warming earth, we're gonna have issues like water scarcity, which creates conflict, right? And rising sea levels, right? Less land, agriculture, droughts, like all this is gonna create more conflict. So if we can come up with techniques and solutions to mitigate this, the result and the reward could be a more peaceful society as well. So, sorry about that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you look at economics, it's specifically concerned with managing resources. And so that it's like an attempt to create a sort of science, right? To find models at least that we can either test to some degree historically or mathematically in some way to see if they work. We're trying to find those patterns, as you say, in psychology, maybe to understand ways that we can work together. Jay, you were talking about organization and things, right? Yeah, maybe we can find ways to politically get together and political science might help us. I feel like we need some help in that direction. You know, human science does often have the image, not from everybody, but for some people as being a low value area of knowledge. There are human science departments in some universities that are being closed down. Certain areas of explorations may lead to really fruitful things with lots of funding, but questions like what is peace? If we get loads of students together and we spend time teaching them about peace, are they going to make advances or not? You can have a lot of people being skeptical about that because it's not as concrete, those kind of things, right? That by definition, human sciences are always going to be a little bit more theoretical and variable and harder to apply. So in terms of costs and rewards, people might question the value of certain human sciences and start shutting them down at the risk of, not solving problems that actually are really important for us to deal with. Any other thoughts about the value of the arts or history? What kind of resources do we have?
In the field of history, and the core over become less more incomplete over time. So now they are using like technology things to find artifacts have been destroyed almost and leaving only a limit amount of living materials. But definitely it will take higher cost like before. But at least we can find new artifacts and then we can gain new knowledge from them.
Great. So discovering new artifacts and things like that will lead to excitement from historians as they get to review and revise their views of the past events. That could be really beneficial. I was finding out about this idea of the limited resource of memory and the limited resource of time. So in terms of history, we can only tell so many stories and keep so much in our head at once. So when we learn a particular history, it might be at the cost of learning another kind of history. If you ask any teacher of history, they will not tell you that they have spare time on their curriculum to fit extra bits in. They're normally rushing through covering everything because there's just trying to tell everything about what happened within a period. You're never done. So much happened and there's so many different ways to explore it. It's a content-rich area. And what that leads me to is this idea of the amount of resources it takes to try and know what happened. Even if you were to study the Cold War, that's actually a huge period with a huge amount of documents. If you just study ancient Greece, the same. So in that sense, what we decide to pay attention to, where we direct our memory is going to be a limited resource in history. I was also thinking about the Louvre as an example of a place where we have a limited amount of time. If you ever go to the Louvre in Paris, you are not going to see everything in there. It's enormous. There's like, I looked it up, there's 35,000 things on display, but there's 620,000 things, mostly in the basement. And people just don't have time to see everything in the Louvre, and they definitely don't have time to see everything in the basement. So that kind of brings me to this idea that with the arts, we have to curate, we have to decide what is valuable, what do people need to see. And I think that maybe a similar thing goes on with history too. Now, not every document is going to be as fascinating, not every story is going to be as useful. So we're going to have to pick and choose a little bit with our resources, what to study, what's going to get funding, what to put in the museum, those kind of things. Do you have any thoughts about what would you consider to make a work of art worth pursuing, or a kind of history worth studying? What's a bit of history that you learned that you thought was really useful and valuable? And if so, what was the value of that?
Do you need to work backwards though and identify value first, and then see how that bit of history or that piece of art reaches that?
That sounds like a good way to do it. What is the value of history? Why do we pursue historical knowledge?
Is it entertainment? Is it producing Hollywood movies? Like, I mean, is it like we were talking about before? Is it conflict resolution? Is it not make the same mistakes again?
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, the history is the like past experience. So through the like past experience, like what our like past generation did, we can learn something, and if they got mistakes, we can prevent to not the same mistakes. I think that's one.
Yeah, that's the value.
I would like to add to Son's point, because I already discussion about this PT, like during Mr. K's TOK class. The PT was like current knowledge is wholly dependent on past knowledge. Like for example, history definitely is like about like current knowledge. I was thinking about that, like why people are pursuing like new knowledge, because they want to develop based on current knowledge, and they are making new knowledge.
Yeah.
So to build the new knowledge, you have to learn from the history.
Well, what's your opinion on the arts? Like, what's the reward? What's the value of arts?
What's my opinion on the value of the art? I think in a way, it's the most natural thing that we do out of all of the others. I mean, I think it's natural to ask questions about the universe, don't get me wrong, that's a very ordinary thing to do, but it's just to kind of make something to amuse ourselves, to entertain ourselves, to express ourselves. That feels like something that's intrinsically valuable. And if we were to try to say, what's this painting worth, we kind of miss the point a little bit. I know that paintings do have value, commercial value. You can trade them and say, oh, that's cool. And people try to make NFTs and say this is worth this much, and create a concept of an item. By its scarcity, it has a certain economic value. But I think at that point, it's not art anymore. Art, to me, would be something that doesn't have that kind of value. Almost by definition, it isn't valuable for any use. Otherwise, it's some other kind of a thing.
It's nothing, I mean, people have done this before. I run a little summer program, and I'm trying to teach students of New York City a little bit about the waters around New York City, the marine life, and hopefully they take some of that back and think about how they and their behaviors impact it in a negative way, and how can they resolve it. But I don't want to say, okay, quiz tomorrow, test, because it's summer, right? So one of the things that I found very successful was they were demonstrating their understanding through art. And that's something I was like, wow, this is gold. Like, it was so valuable. Like, them just creating something wonderful, showing their understanding through a piece of art or they were creating short films, or a public service announcement, or maybe they were modeling something out of clay. And then it was theirs, they owned it. Like, it was just like, they just loved this piece of knowledge they created, and every time they look at it, I'm sure they're gonna make some sort of connection to what they learned about science, right, by creating this piece of art. So that was like a aha for me. But I'm again, like, why did it take me so long to figure that out? Because people have been doing this forever, but I really enjoyed watching that process. Yeah.
I read an article the other day, and I can't remember I was trying to think of the name of it, but in there that someone posed the rhetorical question that what's the value of the Parthenon, right, to the Greeks, as a kind of an example of culture. When we make something like a story, we're shaping culture. When we make a novel, we're shaping the universe a little bit. And that's, we're bending the universe a little bit in the direction of the vision that we have by connecting with other people with something. And that's, so it's not, it does have a use. When I said it doesn't have a use by, what I meant, it doesn't have a certain kind of use. It's not about how you apply it. It's almost like the story in itself is valuable for what it communicates to others or something like that. I know it's sounding a bit vague, but I'm trying to define it as I speak. Any thoughts on that? Let's move on to the question. So we said at the start that this is a question about reconciling. How do we reconcile? So I'd love to hear some strategies. How do we reconcile two opposing forces, the limited resources on the one hand with this drive for knowledge? How do we somehow make these two balance or make them friends? Do we have any suggested solutions, resolutions, ways of avoiding the issue or solving the problem? What are your thoughts? How can we reconcile? That goes straight to the question itself.
I think to reconcile those two, the limited resources and our drive towards knowledge, I think at first we have to find a way to optimize the using resources and then prioritize topic to research based on the potential impacts, because like our resources are limited, so we have to find the best way to use these like finite resources. So yeah,
Optimization. Yeah. Good. How do we do that? How do we optimize our resources in the natural science or in the other areas of knowledge? We need to optimize them. Maybe we can just leave that as an open question for everyone to ponder. Do we have any other strategies we can optimize our use of resources? Are there any other strategies for reconciliation?
So, one of the movements that's, I would say, that's happened recently and really has grown momentum is this concept of citizen science. Like, you're using the whole globe to help you research something or solve some sort of issue. There was, so biology real quick, proteins have special shapes, and those special shapes allow them to do something. And those special shapes are just basically caused by the order in which these amino acids, these building blocks are. So if you change the order, you change the shape. So this gamer invented, it's called Folded, he invented this game where you fold proteins. And they've already used this game to treat diseases and illnesses already, because the public helps solve it. So there's a way to reconcile it. You're getting the world to help you with your cause. Up and down the Hudson River, people get out of their house and they check the bacteria counts. So we have this ongoing set of data about the health of the Hudson River. So I think citizen science might be a way to reconcile some of this. It's addicting. If you ever go on to Fold It, have you ever played it?
I've read about it. I've never
It's
played it.
so addicting. Like, you're playing with these proteins, and
Yeah.
it might sound really nerdy, but like, wow, like,
I
I
actually-
need it to fit this certain way.
I think I might do that tonight.
It's
Yeah.
so yeah, Fold It.
Yeah.
And it starts off very simple, and then it gets more complex and more complex, then you're folding these proteins that are hundreds of amino acids long. It's fun. Sorry, I'm a nerd.
Sounds pretty cool. I'm into it.
I feel that like we don't need to optimize limited research. I mean, of course, like we should because we don't have like plenty of research, but also it is like essential to create a new research like such as renewable energy, and also we can get like from different perspective to partial knowledge. But I just want to say to like other people, I feel like we don't need to like just focus on like limited research. Maybe we can create a new method to get knowledge and more research.
Also, we might be able to therefore, because you were talking about the limitations of fossil fuels, there may be ways to find renewable energies that would allow us to not see our finite resources as quite so finite. That's one possible reconciliation that we might have. Good. Any thoughts about that? I imagine you know a fair bit about renewables.
I think actually you just made me think about how cyclical it is. It's almost just it snowballs, right? You're using maybe fossil fuel technology to build renewable energy, which allows your ability to do more, and that new invention that you're able to create with that renewable energy maybe allows you to even do more, right? So I think it will just build on itself, and if we have that kind of mentality, it could be limitless.
In my TOK class this morning, one of my students said that one possible solution might be getting computers to do this, and we know that AI has really advanced knowledge in lots of ways. I think including things like protein folding. Computers are able to process things so much faster than humans can. And that could save us one resource at a time. And they were suggesting it could also save other resources. But I was thinking that I don't know what the statistics on this are. We'd have to look this up. But AI itself is quite it consumes a lot of resources in terms of computing power. Like the draining of energy from that is quite heavy, I believe. It's not my expertise, but I'm told that it's costly to keep these servers going.
Yeah, I was reading Feynman, who's this Nobel Prize winning physicist, wrote a book about computers can only be so big because we'll never have the technology to control the heat it generates. I mean, that was a book a long time ago, and I think he was talking about like a 12 gigabyte computer. Sometimes the finite resource is the imagination of our brain, right? So, like, I feel that should be limitless, and we should never think about stopping. And there's always ways that the human mind can work around things. Anyway, sorry.
A reconciliation, to me, by definition, would be something that would be sustainable. So we could use this word sustainability to define something that is not going to use up all of the resources. And that's my understanding of the term, that it's something that we can keep doing. And in finding genuinely sustainable approaches to human pursuit of knowledge might put a big limitation on our pursuit of knowledge. We may realize that that's going to make us stop doing certain things, certain kinds of space exploration. We might say, look, it fails on the cost-benefit analysis. We're not getting X out, and it's costing this much, and we need to survive. We're going to have to stop to be sustainable. So I'm wondering if we were to apply this cost-benefit analysis, what things are sustainable practices? Is art sustainable? Do we have to make only recycled art, or can we allow ourselves these kind of frivolous expenses of things that might seem like a waste of time, but might help produce knowledge? How much leeway do we give our researchers to spend time, years going on to a problem that they might not solve? Do we just say everybody has to focus on a specific problem? It's the one kind of global problem that takes over and then we haven't got time for anything else, so we've got to save ourselves or survive. I can imagine that to define our limited resources in a certain kind of a way from an ethical viewpoint could really narrow the pursuit of knowledge into, we've got this one problem to solve. So like, how do we keep open all of the different areas of knowledge if other things take over? I don't know if I made sense there. I wasn't ranting. Let me put that back as a bit more of a question. So, what is it that we are getting from the areas of knowledge that helps us pass the cost-benefit analysis? And how can we reconcile that? Kind of thinking about the question.
What if we stop putting prices on things, right? Just, so like I was talking about again, the experimental process is the journey, and from that journey, you learn how to do things differently. If we were all working towards the same goal because it provides the biggest reward, it's like, I don't know, some sort of miracle cure, or it's a perfect renewable energy, but it doesn't allow people to go and search other renewable energies. Then you're all going the same route. You're all taking the same road, and there's no exploration in being imaginative and doing things in different ways. And that's where creativity and imagination lives, and allows for even more knowledge that can result in whatever we decide is reward, if it's financial or intrinsic. Or so this evening just made me think about like just the value of the journey of science. Like I never really thought about the journey, because we were talking about, oh, what did they find? What did they invent? What did you discover? How did you discover? What was the process to get there? What were your mistakes? What did you learn? Like that's the value. I don't know, that's the reward.
I was thinking that, I agree with you, by the way. We should have that kind of open thing, but it's quite idealized, right? We want that, but in reality, like a university department will probably not give permission to everyone to just go and study whatever they feel like. Maybe if you kind of a really high level, well-placed person, you can say, I want to spend my time and just kind of think about this problem for a couple of years, and like, yeah, you solved that math problem the other year, or you did that great work in physics, you've got free reign. I don't know, but I'm imagining that a lot of the heads of the university department will review it, and they'll be like, I don't think we can kind of keep paying you to do that. That's not very productive. I don't know how much freedom they will have in their academic pursuits to just say, I feel like studying this protein for 5 years. I want you to keep paying me. They have to kind of prove, I think, the value of what they're going to explore and say, I'm going to do this. This is my goals. I need this funding. It's going to cost this much.
But how many discoveries are serendipitous? It's like Velcro and Post-it notes and pantyhose and all these things were just accidents.
That's the downside, is you're kind of fettering, like limiting the research by saying it has to have this output, like I don't know, it has to feed into the military or into the economy or into the fame of a lot of it is now we live in this kind of world where they have university rankings, not just of the universities, but you guys might have seen the ranking of your university, but individual academics ranked against one another in terms of how many publications they have, how much impact those publications have. So you have this weird economy in universities where they're competing for that, which then means if you have an interest in something that might be really valuable to people, but no one cares, and they're not going to click on your paper, it doesn't work in the attention economy. And maybe that pushes people into studying certain areas that get clicks, that get people talking, that follow a buzz or a trend. I think that those are interesting limitations that we might have on our knowledge, is that academics, they want to keep their job. They want to maybe get fame, and they want to get funding. We're coming to the end of our time. I wanted to see, is there anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say, and because I didn't direct a question that direction? We can go to our audience. Maybe some of you have some questions you'd like to pose, either to the panel or points or comments that you'd like to make about the question or about the way that we've discussed it today. Any thoughts?
Dan, you had something?
Yeah, but I don't think I can remember, so it was.
You made room for new knowledge.
Yeah.
It's getting pushed on.
Yeah.
It's your finite resources, yeah.
Yeah.
You have finite cognitive resources.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't know if we would have had the opportunity before, probably yes, but now I don't know. There we went into so many different alleys, you know.
I have a thought that I'm thinking about, which is a little different than the question. I'm not thinking about how to reconcile the drive to pursue knowledge with the finite resources, but I keep thinking about what the relationship is between how finite the resources and how relentless our drive is. So I'm thinking of two things. I'm thinking of history and politics. So what I thought of when you mentioned people's lives as a finite resource is when you have a historical event and gradually the people who survived it and witnessed it start to die and their memory starts to fade. In that case, the more finite the resources, the more finite their memory is, the more finite their lives are, the greater or the more relentless our drive to document their knowledge. But then I'm thinking about politics, and I thought about social media in politics, and I think social media gives us almost an infinite resource of what people think and say. Not infinite, of course, but it seems like it's approaching infinite. And I think for some people that leads to a more relentless desire to accumulate knowledge. But I wonder if by accumulating the knowledge of just what people think and say, our ability to understand politics is reduced because we get caught up in what did this person say, that person say, and we slowly lose the ability to understand the substance. So I wonder, that's just kind of my thinking, but I wonder what people think about the relationship between how finite the resource is and how relentless we are driven to pursue it. I don't know if people understand.
Yeah, no, I understood. I'm going to pick up on that second point. So the relentless drive to pursue knowledge doesn't necessarily mean quality knowledge, right? I mean, we ought to pursue knowledge that is useful and valuable, but your point is, I think, if I took it right, that everybody wants to pursue their own little perspective and theory, and that might kind of clog up the system a little bit for actually seeing things clearly.
Yeah, that's my point. Social media is an incredible document on people's views. I certainly would not argue that it increases anyone's understanding of anything, actually. Yeah, certainly not. I mean, I think a lot of people, for some people they shut down because of how almost infinite the resource is of what people think of opinions on social media. I don't know if people, it's like the old thing of the internet gives us inexhaustible information, almost information. I don't know that the internet has increased anyone's wisdom or understanding of much, but maybe I could feel bad on that, but it gives us almost inexhaustible resources of information. I don't think it's increased our understanding of all that much. Makes it more democratic, our access to knowledge makes it more accessible, but I guess what I'm saying is that dividing knowledge into information versus understanding, and sometimes the information is almost unlimited, the understanding doesn't increase with it, in my view.
Anyone want to respond to that?
Wouldn't the internet though, because you have so many more information, like me for example, if we wouldn't have the internet, I wouldn't have the ability to look up all the information that is that I can look up right now, and that would open up more, at least for me, or more opportunities to pursue knowledge. For example, if I would realize a science paper and I would use that to discover something new, without the internet, without the accessibility to all those resources which we have, I think it would be much harder to get new knowledge, because also knowledge is based on other knowledge, right? And yeah, if we don't have the knowledge of what other people around the world, you know, discovered, that I think that would limit us.
Yeah, I think I could definitely like peel back on my point about the internet, but I guess I'm still stuck on my point about social media, which is really like, it seems like an infinite document of what people think and say. Do you think that social media, following what this person says, that person says, increases your understanding of politics? Or does it make you mistake the trees for the forest or the forest?
I think there's pros and cons. So pros is there are many viewpoints which I wouldn't consider or think about without social media, and that's like makes me like more open-minded and also like more knowledgeable.
Yeah.
However, also about some information on social media just misleads you because it's wrong information, you know, and then it creates false knowledge, which
Right.
is pretty counterproductive.
Yeah, like for instance, I don't know if anyone's aware that there was a presidential election this year and Donald Trump won it, and Donald Trump has said many things on social media, and I know many people who are obsessed with following every single thing he says to the detriment of their understanding of the substance of his policies. But they're, even my mom was like this for example, like obsessed with everything that he says, and it limited her ability to understand anything beyond just what the surface of what he said, rather than anything more substantial.
I would argue that his opponent could have learned from that and maybe gone into social media to see what people really think. Maybe she'd get more of an insight about how the country's feeling. So I think there was an opportunity there to learn more. I'm not saying her specifically, but I'm saying like as a party, there was an opportunity probably to figure out, okay, what is the temperature of this country? As opposed to just washing it all aside as BS. That's what I would argue. I think there was an opportunity to gain some information to add a reward, perhaps, in the end.
I think most news media fell into the trap of covering political candidates as being mostly a series of what they said day to day, and to the detriment of more meaningful discussion of their politics.
That's also where I get my recipes.
So on that lighter note, I think we're going to wrap it up today, so we're at time and have things to do. It's getting dark this time of year. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank
Thank
you.
Mr. Fleming for taking part.
I enjoyed
Thank
it.
you very much.
I feel smarter, thank you.